Hello and welcome to Middlesex Moments, the news and information program produced by faculty, staff, and students at Middlesex Community College. I'm Stephen Minkler, Academic Dean and Lead Campus Administrator at the college, and your host. As always, Middlesex Moments comes to you from the radio and television studios in the Center for New Media, located on the main campus of Middlesex Community College in Middletown. The purpose of Middlesex Moments is to give you a small glimpse into the programs and services offered by the college. You'll meet faculty, staff, and students, and you'll learn about the ways in which the college partners with businesses, agencies, and schools to create a stronger community for those whom we serve. And I'm really pleased to be joined today by President Mark Ojakian, President of the Connecticut State College and University System. Thanks for joining me, Mark.
It's great to be here again.
Great. Now, Mark, you've spent almost your entire career in public service. How did you initially become motivated to dedicate your career in this fashion?
Well, I think the way that I first came to understand the need for folks in public service and the benefit of public service was when I was in college. Mm-hmm. I was the president of my freshman and sophomore classes. I went to a small liberal arts college in New Hampshire, majored in history. And I'm very fond of saying that I was a student leader during the Vietnam War. Now, many of your listeners may remember that. Mm-hmm. Many will have learned it in the history books. But it was important to me at that time to not only talk about issues that mattered, but also show that I cared enough to take on leadership roles, which I have continued to do for the past 38 years.
Mm-hmm. And we're also happen to be recording this program at about the time of the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King, and certainly shortly after that of Robert F. Kennedy, and how that really changed the country's perspective on civil rights in many ways. And how did that affect you as a student at that time?
Well, I think both with the Martin Luther King assassination and Kennedy assassination, as student leaders, we saw folks that we looked up to, that were really paving the path for us forward, change. Mm-hmm. Within the blink of an eye, those icons really were gone. Mm-hmm. Those folks that we looked up to change the world were gone. And so I think it became incumbent upon us as student leaders to pick up that mantle and continue to fight for what we believed in, whether it was in a local, very small campus or a Kent State or some bigger institution in the United States.
Right. Yeah, so there is certainly an element about leadership, but really a role for a leader is to get those behind him or her to move forward with some sort of momentum, some social change in this case.
I think if I could, say it very simply, the role of a leader is to be decisive, is to move in a direction that benefits all, and try to get as many people behind you as you can. You are never going to please everybody mm-hmm. in a leadership role, and it's not a popularity contest. So your role is to look out for the best interests of those you serve, mm-hmm. to try to get as much participation and collaboration as possible. But in the end, you need to be the one to make a decision and to really be the instrument of change.
Mm-hmm. And I think we're seeing some extraordinary leadership from the young people in Parkland, Florida, who have really ignited a national movement over school safety and gun violence. And I think you must have some thoughts about how they are entering this leadership role that maybe some of them have embraced, but maybe not have fully understood what their responsibilities are.
To be honest, I'm just truly inspired by those young people, not only in Parkland, but around the country that have taken up the call to action. Too many times we see people who are impacted by these situations not have the ability to do that. I was the governor's chief of staff during Sandy Hook. And at that time, people wanted to protect their children because they were little children. And I think there was not the same kind of movement that we're seeing from high school kids. But these are the adults of the future. These are our future leaders. And I am so inspired by watching them, take the baton and run down the field.
Right. Well, and generating that future leadership is part of what we're all about here in the university and college system.
That's correct. That's correct. And as I travel to all of the campuses, and I was just on your campus a week or a week and a half ago to meet with the student leaders of your institution. And once again, was inspired by their motivation, by their skills, by the way that they were able to articulate their comments, their concerns, and what they wanted to do in the future. So as I, near an age where I'm looking for a beach chair to plop onto, I am confident that we are educating and inspiring leaders for the future.
Great. Well, we have time for a quick break right now, but when we come back, more with CSCU President Mark Ojakian on leadership and actually some difficult decisions coming ahead in a project known as Students First. You're listening to Middlesex Moments. Please stay tuned for more. Welcome back to Middlesex Moments. This is Steve Minkler, together with my guest, Mark Ojakian, president of the Connecticut State Colleges and University System, which includes Middlesex Community College here in Middletown and our satellite location in Meriden. Before the break, we were talking with Mark about his own experiences as a student leader. And, Mark, I would think in the last generation or two, while we still have a lot of work to do, we have made significant progress in recognizing the rights of others and upholding what it really means to be, fully participatory in American society. And I just was curious what your thoughts were on that.
I think you're absolutely right. As I look back on my service, being an openly gay man, I was very involved in the civil rights movement for the LGBTQ community at a time when nobody understood really transgender, queer, all of these other terms that have now become terms of art. But struggling through passing a gay civil rights bill here in the state of Connecticut, to a co-parent adoption bill here in the state of Connecticut, to civil unions, and actually leading an organization called Love Makes a Family when marriage equality became the law of Connecticut, and now it's the law of the land. Mm-hmm. So we've made significant progress. We now have full protections for transgender people here in the state of Connecticut. But as I look nationally at the landscape, my concern continues to be the fact that we need to continue to fight to make sure that these rights are not rolled back. And I think people need to be vigilant. People need to speak out. And I will continue to do that as long as I have a voice.
Good. Well, and I think we need to look to our own students sometimes for some leadership. I'm really proud here at Middlesex that one of our largest student organizations is SPEAK, Students Promoting Equality, Acceptance, and Knowledge, which is kind of started its life as a gay-straight alliance, but it really has become a hub of many student activities here on campus. And that group is so well respected for the work that they do here. And kind of tying that to the thought about you being a former student leader yourself, how have you been influenced and inspired by the students you've met in your time as president of our system?
Well, I have to tell you that the most enjoyable part of my job is meeting with students. And since day one, almost 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago now, I have traveled far and wide across the state to all of our campuses to meet with students. Not only student leaders, mm-hmm. but heads of student organizations, commuter students and some of our residential universities, to really talk to them about why are you in school? What do you hope to achieve for your future? What are some of those obstacles that get in your way to achieving those goals, and how can I help? And that's what inspires me to make sometimes the tough decisions that I've had, to make. I think right here, if we're talking about Middlesex and we're talking about the Meriden satellite, it was very important early on in my tenure to make sure that we had a presence of this institution in Meriden. Mm-hmm. I heard from students that they were not able to get from Meriden to Middletown in a timely fashion in order to complete their education. And so we worked very hard together, mm-hmm. and thank you for your help on that with the local delegation, to come up with a solution. So our students are not your traditional students. They work, they have families, they have transportation issues, and we have a responsibility as leaders to make sure that we change the way we conduct business to make it easier for them to succeed.
Absolutely. Were there some consistent themes that you heard from students about the kinds of, other than transportation is one, and that's a big one, and you did a lot to get the UPass system in place.
Transportation was big. The cost of books was big, and we were able to now negotiate a new contract with our bookstore vendor where books are now cheaper and there's more scholarship dollars that are devoted to our students as a result of bookstore sales. I heard a lot about students feeling not included. Remember, this was a time when our DACA students were feeling threatened, our Muslim students were feeling threatened, our gay and lesbian students were feeling threatened. And so what I heard from students was, we are the future of this state and of this nation. Please help us feel included, respect us as individuals and as groups. And we've done a lot over the last 2.5 years to foster a climate of respect and of embracing and celebrating our diversity and making sure that all of our students feel included as part of the greater campus community.
Definitely. This is Middlesex Moments. Steve Minkler here with my guest, Mark Ojakian, president of the Connecticut State College and University System. And you're right. Your office and you in particular have done an awful lot to ensure that students feel included and embraced on all of our campuses. And some of what you were hearing about obstacles also comes at the same time that the state budget situation is just horrific. But we've embarked as a system on something called Students First. And maybe you can explain that a little to our listeners, how that came about, but also where it stands right now.
Well, thank you for the question. I've been talking about this for over a year now, and I'll continue to talk about it as long as I need to, because it's in the best interest of the collective students that we all serve. As state resources have declined, and they've declined significantly, we are faced with a couple choices. The choices are, do we pick winners and losers among our community colleges and reduce the number of locations that students can get their education at, or do we refine and restructure our delivery service model to our students so that we can keep all of our locations open? So under Students First, we are proposing, and the board has voted to approve, that we consolidate all of our community colleges into one community college of Connecticut with 12 locations and the satellite campuses. So all the locations stay in place, all of the local community connections stay in place, the relationships with the foundation stay in place. We are trying to find a way to continue to offer the services to our students at the locations that they currently go to, because as we just talked about, for example, a satellite campus student had a hard enough time getting to a main campus. Imagine if we had to close that. What would happen to that student?
Right.
They would either have to incur great expense to get here, or they'd be left behind. And so the tough decision is whether or not we're going to really do what's in the best interest of our students as a whole. And remember, I oversee a community college system that has about 55,000 credit earning students and about 30,000 non-credit earning students. So I need to look at what's best for the whole, respect the individual institution and the identity. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to put our system on a sustainable financial path into the future, not cut student services. As a matter of fact, the goal is to enhance those services once we're on a more stable footing. It's been met with criticism, as I fully expected it to be. But as I said earlier, the role of a leader is not to win a popularity contest. The role of the leader is to take the job seriously and to move in a direction that benefits the constituents that leader serves.
Sure. And other than transportation, there are certain other benefits to students, such as if we, as 12 colleges now, all have similar academic programs, that those would become more alike, if not the same, so a student can go from campus to complete their education.
Absolutely. I was surprised to find out that we still have a system where credits do not transfer seamlessly between one community college and another. And the point of this initiative is to have a faculty-driven process where curriculum is aligned. So where it makes sense to have programs called the same, then they'll be called the same. Where it makes sense for that not to happen, it will not happen. This is not something that's going to be driven top down. It's going to be something that is similar to the way our TAP program has worked between our 2-year and our 4-year institutions. It's going to be really faculty driven. And I think it makes all the sense to the student to be able to complete one application form, take their financial aid wherever they need to take it, have a seamless transfer of credits between locations, and to ultimately complete sooner and cheaper.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that note, we do need to take a quick break to pay the bill, so to speak. But you're listening to Middlesex Moments, coming to you from Middlesex Community College. Please stay tuned. Welcome back to Middlesex Moments, coming to you from Middlesex Community College. This is Steve Minkler with my guest, Mark Ojakian, president of the Connecticut State College and University System, which includes Middlesex Community College. Before the break, we were talking about the Students First project, which will consolidate the 12 community colleges into a singly accredited institution. And Mark, the notion of accreditation comes to mind. And where in the process is Students First with getting it accredited, or at least having some response from our accreditor?
We have submitted our what's known as a substantive change proposal to our accreditor, which is the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. And we expect to get some sort of indication of pending approval, some variation on that theme sometime by the end of April. The proposal calls for the beginning of the new college to be in place by July 1 of 2019. That's the administrative organizational structure. And so we're waiting to hear if we can proceed, and assuming we can proceed, we will proceed.
Okay. Now, you said earlier, too, that you received some expected criticism from, I'm sure, faculty and staff and some students. What were some of their main concerns?
Well, I think some of their main concerns surrounded the difficulty with change. Some institutions felt that they were doing just fine and to really leave them alone, and they would be able to, I think, navigate this budget situation over the next 5 years just adequately. Some was around programmatic issues, which we tried to address. But I think there's always misinformation that continues to get out into the campus community. We heard that the local community connection would be lost and the role of the foundation would no longer be the important role that it is. Mm-hmm. So what we've tried to do is put together teams to work on all of these issues. So to the foundation issue, we have put together a task force that is representative of each foundation that is working on best practices and how can we continue to raise the dollars needed to support the local institution even under this new structure. The foundation will still be affiliated with the local institution. There's not going to be a pooling of foundation money and then I decide who gets what. Mm-hmm. The local connection is still going to be vitally important. And we're grouping the new college in 3 regions that will more focus on the workforce boards that are now divided up into regions. We want to have a better connection with our workforce boards because, as you know, the community colleges are the pipeline to future employment. And many employers, especially here in Middlesex County, are looking to Middlesex to provide them with the employees that they're going to need in the future. I felt it was important to go out to each campus and to host a town hall and to take the criticism because I wanted to have people hear directly from me as to why we were doing this. I'll just say that all you have to do is look at a 5-year fiscal projection for our community colleges to know that no institution will be able to survive on its own without dramatically cutting programs and services. And if you cut programs and services, you're going to have less students completing, and it's not going to be good for anybody. Yeah. So this is the much more sustainable and resilient path into the future.
Yeah, that becomes sort of this death spiral, doesn't it, of an institution which we need to avoid at most cost, right?
Absolutely. I mean, all I have to do is ask each of the folks that lead campuses now, well, what would you cut next year with another $30 million cut? And it's student-focused services. Library hours would have to continue to be cut. Some campuses, I don't know about this one, Steve, but some campuses are closed all weekend. And that's only because there's not people that are here to be able to run the campuses. You know, the most startling figure I use is the average number of academic advisors at the colleges to students. And in our system, it's one advisor to 848 students. Now, I know that a lot of other people advise students. Don't get me wrong. We have great dedicated faculty. We have administrators that guide students. But when push comes to shove, we don't have specifically identified individuals whose primary role it is to take a student once they come in to college and advise them throughout their completion.
Right. Well, I think the question I get most often asked is, how will this change Middlesex Community College in some ways? And I think the intent of that question is, will they lose some of the people that they interface with, people going out into the community to work with businesses and discern what possible courses or programs they might need? Or if not, are there going to be extra layers of administration that in order to get things approved? Do you see us still remaining as nimble as we can be at the local level?
I think you have to remain as nimble as you currently are, because community colleges need to adapt to the local environment and the local workforce needs quickly. Because if they don't, then the workforce, the employers are going to go somewhere else. And we have the biggest wealth of talent in our system to be able to do that. So we want to keep the colleges as flexible as possible. The intention is to remove layers of bureaucracy, not create layers of bureaucracy. And it will still be the role of the local campus to interact with the local community, and whoever leads that local campus to go out into the business community to be able to identify what their needs are now and into the future.
Okay. Well, earlier we were talking about students. You yourself were a student leader, and how we've both been inspired by the leadership of our students, and the whole importance of student voice. How have students been involved in this project known as Students First?
Well, students have been involved. I mean, the proposal was crafted based on a number of things I heard from students. Number one, as I traveled around the state. Number two, we have a student advisory committee, which is made up of representatives of each of our institutions, 4 and 2 year. And we have relied heavily on the community college representatives for their input. And we have been very pleased that they not have only responded to the call, but have gone beyond the call to try to be helpful to us now and into the future. As a matter of fact, the current chair of the Student Advisory Committee is a student from a community college who I've asked to chair the Consolidation Committee, because I think it's important that we have students at the table. The Student Advisory Committee has wholeheartedly endorsed Students First, because they're the ones that understand what the challenges are that they currently have. When they can't see an advisor, when the tutoring hours are reduced, when X, Y, and Z happens, it's their education that gets hurt.
Right. And in a parallel fashion, many of those consolidation committees are also staffed by representatives from all 12 community colleges as well.
Absolutely. We have faculty, we have staff, we have administrators. We are trying to be as transparent and participatory as possible. I know there was some criticism early on that the process was not transparent, but I firmly believe that if I had not proposed this initiative, we would still be talking about how to make change at this point in time, a year and a half later. So I fully believe that somebody needs to start the conversation. The conversation began in earnest, and at times more than earnest. And here we are now on the, I think, hopefully verge of getting accredited and moving forward to a much better system for our students.
Okay. So in the short amount of time we have left, I mean, if you can project ahead 5 or 6 years or so, what would you see the Community College of Connecticut being at that point?
I would see the Community College of Connecticut being a much more robust institution of higher education. I would see greater enrollment as a whole in the institution. I'd see greater diversity. I'd see even more adult learners. I think we haven't paid as much attention to that population. And I would see everybody working together on behalf of the students. The turf walls would come down. The competition would not need to exist. And we would be in the business of providing a community college education for more than 55,000 students at that point in time. And maybe I'll come back and take a course and do some things I always wanted to do.
All right, there you go. Well, thank you very much, Mark Ojakian, President of the Connecticut State Colleges and Universities System, for joining me today in Middlesex Moments.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And for our listeners, thank you for joining us for another edition of Middlesex Moments. As always, you're welcome to visit us in person at our main campus, located at 100 Training Hill Road in Middletown, or at our Meriden Center, located at Platt High School at 220 Coe Avenue in the city of Meriden, where we offer afternoon and evening classes 4 days a week. And of course, you can visit us online 24/7 at mxcc.edu. For Middlesex Community College, I'm Steve Minkler, and we hope to see you again soon.